When you picture someone sharing their faith, what do you see? For a lot of people, it could be someone on a street corner holding a sign telling strangers that they're going to hell, or somebody at a party who's cornered you and won't leave until you say the sinner's prayer, or someone who's just trying to argue that Christianity is true because this one thing that happened in history. And look, I get it. I understand the urgency behind that. But that methodology, I don't think we actually see that in the Bible. And honestly, I think it does more damage than we realize. What brought me to Jesus wasn't a sermon, it wasn't an argument. It was somebody who invited me to play dodgeball. Someone who invited me into a space to play a sport that I loved and made me feel like I belonged. I think that's what we're called to do. And I think we need to learn to do it more. Sound good? Let's get into it. I'm serious. It was dodgeball. Middle school was a hard time for me, like I think it was for a lot of us. I was kind of weird. I didn't really fit in. There was no group that I felt like I could call my own. But somebody that I did know from church that I had gone to before invited me to play dodgeball. They played on Wednesday nights and they needed someone else for their team. They knew that I played baseball and could throw a dodgeball pretty well, so they wanted me to be included. And that was it. That was the door for me to find Jesus. Nobody sat me down and walked me through the Romans road before I could play. I didn't have to sign a statement of faith before I walked into the room. They just made space for me. And I felt something that I hadn't felt in a while. Genuine belonging. And then after I belonged is when I started asking more questions. Why these people were kind to me, why they were different. And that led me to this faith. Fast forward to college, where I was very involved in a campus ministry, and their slogan was literally, "You belong before you believe." Because what they always did when you wanted to invite somebody in was not just invite them to our Bible study. It was to invite them to an event that we called Compassion, where we would go out and feed the hungry. We would go do artwork with people who were homeless. We would do yard work for someone who was disabled and couldn't do it themselves. We just went to help, serve the community, no strings attached, no altar call at the end of it. We just wanted them to come be a part of serving the community with us, and the Spirit did the rest. Now, I'm telling you all this because I feel like we've been handed a version of outreach that isn't exactly what Jesus taught us. And I think it's causing more harm than good. It's closing doors that should be wide open. So today we're going to look at what I believe the Bible actually says about how to bring people into the kingdom. And it might surprise you. We're going to start with something that Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians chapter 2 that I feel like reframes this entire discussion. We do not use words that come from human wisdom. Instead, we speak words given to us by the Spirit, using the Spirit's words to explain spiritual truths. But people who aren't spiritual can't receive these truths from God's Spirit. It all sounds foolish to them and they can't understand it, for only those who are spiritual can understand what the Spirit means. So let's sit with this for a second. This is Paul, the one who planted a ton of churches throughout all of Europe, perhaps the greatest evangelist in history, and he's telling us that these spiritual truths require spiritual receptivity. It's not an intellectual problem. You're not going to logic your way to it. You're not going to argue someone into believing this. Spirit has to open that door, not you. Now, I want to be clear here because I don't want people walking away from this video saying all they have to do is live a good life and never share the gospel. That's not what I'm saying. Jesus gave us the Great Commission. He said, go and make disciples. And Paul says in Romans 10 that people can't believe what they haven't heard. Verbal proclamation matters. It's real and it's commanded. But here's the question. If the Spirit is in charge of revealing these spiritual truths, what is our job in that process? Paul, in that very same letter in chapter 9, says, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. So it's common ground first. This is the same man who wrote chapter 2, who said that the Spirit has the job of opening people's hearts. He tells us that his method is to enter people's world before ever opening his mouth about Jesus. Chapter 2 gives us the why. Chapter 9 gives us the how. And together they give us the whole framework. You can't argue someone in, but what you can do is create space, create conditions and a place for the Spirit to work. If any of this is new for you and it feels like it's making sense, please hit that like button down below. It tells me you want to see more content like this and helps YouTube show this video to other people. Thank you. Now here's the cool thing. This isn't just Paul's idea, it was also Jesus' method. If we look in Luke 15 verses 1 and 2, we see this. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. The religious establishment was scandalized. Jesus kept the wrong company. He ate with the wrong people. He showed up in the wrong places. And his response to that criticism is the rest of this entire chapter. We see the parable of the lost sheep, the lost coin, the prodigal son. Stories that constantly show us that Jesus goes out to find the people who are apart, and he invites them in and makes them feel like they belong. That is the method. That is his message. We can think about Zacchaeus too. In Luke chapter 19, Zacchaeus is a tax collector, and in that culture, it meant that he was a cheat. He would get rich off of exploiting his neighbors. But Jesus walks up to him and says, "Hey, I'm going to eat dinner at your house tonight." Before a word about repentance, before any type of theological discussion, he says, "Zacchaeus, come down. I'm going to your house tonight." He invited himself to dinner with a man that the entire town despised. Think about the woman who washed Jesus' feet in Luke 7. She shows up to a dinner party at a Pharisee's house uninvited. She's weeping. She's pouring perfume on Jesus' feet. The religious people there are absolutely horrified that she's even there, but Jesus doesn't just tolerate her presence. He defends her publicly in front of everyone. That pattern is consistent. Belonging came before believing. Presence came before proclamation. Jesus didn't require people to clean up before he showed up. He showed up first, and then transformation happened. So if that's the model, if presence and belonging come first, then what does the Bible actually say about what we need to do? I think John 13:35 tells us very simply what we need to do. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. Not your theology, not your church attendance, not your moral record, your love. The witness is your life. And I want to pair this with a quote from Brennan Manning in the Ragamuffin Gospel, because if you're a Christian who actually wants to see other people come to know Jesus, this hits really hard. The greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips and walk out the door and deny him by their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. We can read that again. The single greatest cause of atheism. Not science, not philosophy, not intellectual arguments against God. It's Christians who say one thing but live another. When the life doesn't match the words become noise, or worse, a reason for people to walk away entirely. But the good news is that we have the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians chapter 5. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. And what I want you to know about all of these things is that they are very disarming in today's world, a world that is run by anxiety, competition, and self-interest. Someone who is genuinely patient, not a performative patience, but actually patient, stands out. Someone who has real joy, a joy that lasts through hardship and things that are difficult. That is something new. And people who are kind without an agenda. That's rare. It's strange, but in the best possible way. You don't have to announce your faith. The fruit will announce your faith for you. And eventually, people will get curious about the tree. Now, I want to pause here and ask you, think about your own story. Was there a point in your life where someone loved you into a room before they even brought up Jesus? Or maybe you did that for someone else. I'd love for you to drop it in the comments below, because these stories are the most powerful evidence for the things that I'm saying during this video. Now, here's where this gets even tougher. In Luke chapter 6, verse 35, we see this. But love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Love your enemies, do good to them, lend to them without expecting return. This is not how the world works. It breaks people's categories, and Jesus knew it. In just a few verses before this, Jesus talks about how if you only love those who love you, why should you get credit for that? Even sinners and evil people do that. If you only do good to those who do good to you, why should you get credit for it? Even sinners and evil people do that. This is the differentiator. Anyone can be kind to someone who's kind back to them. That's basic human reciprocity. Now, I get it. There are people who can't even manage to do that. But Jesus says there are people who want nothing to do with God that even do this. What makes Christian life strange in the best way is that love goes further than it has to. It's sacrifice that costs something. It's generosity that doesn't want something in return. And when people see that, when they see you being genuinely kind to someone who wronged you, attempting to reconcile with them, or when they see you give without any expectation of getting something back, they don't know what to do with it. It doesn't fit in with their worldview, and that's when they start to ask questions. In Reaching Out, Henri Nouwen says something about this topic, and he puts it this way. Hospitality means primarily the creation of free space where the stranger can enter and become a friend instead of an enemy. Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them space where change can happen. You're not creating a community to convert people. You're creating a space where they can feel safe. And in this space, the Spirit can work. Also from Henri Nouwen, in The Wounded Healer, we see him talk about this topic in terms of presence. The friend who can be silent with us in a moment of despair or confusion, who can stay with us in an hour of grief and bereavement, who can tolerate not knowing, not curing, not healing, and face with us the reality of our own powerlessness. That is a friend who cares. Now, this quote hits me right at home because back in college, my campus minister used to tell a story about one of their students who had lost a close family member. I think it was a parent. There were people who worked at the ministry that were called interns. It was people who had graduated college the year before and chose to stick around for one more year and help out. As soon as they got the news that this student had lost their parent, this intern ran to their dorm, knocked on their door, and just gave them a hug. I think the student had a test or something really big coming up the next day, so they just had to stay there. And the intern sat with them in their room all night while they studied. And the student later on said that just seeing the shadow of the person with them made them feel comfort. It made them feel safe and loved. Ministry begins with presence and not answers. Fixing someone is not loving them. You don't have to have the right thing to say. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just be there without an agenda, without a script. And that kind of love, the love that stays, is what opens doors. Now, I want to say something to people who feel like their faith isn't big enough to matter, like you're not doing enough, like you're not reaching enough people. Frederick Buechner, in Wishful Thinking, wrote this: "The life I touch, for good or ill, will touch another life, and that in turn another, until who knows where the trembling stops, or in what far place my touch will be felt." You don't know how far one act of kindness goes. You don't know how one moment of genuine belonging can change somebody's heart. The friend of mine that invited me to Dodgeball probably doesn't even know that that was the start of something really big for my life. In his mind, it may have just been, we need another person for Dodgeball, and I know that Max can throw a ball pretty well, so let's invite him. But that moment touched my life, and it has changed so much. And I'm hoping that I can use that moment to further change people's lives too. The goal of this isn't a conversion count. It's a depth of relationship, real presence, and genuine love. I mean, if I learn at the end of my life that I've only ever helped one or two people come to Jesus, I will consider it a full success. I hope I help more people, but seriously, one person that I know I've changed would make me feel like my life made a difference. You may never see the full outcome or the full reach of what your actions have done, but the Spirit doesn't need you to see it. The Spirit just needs you to invite people, to make them feel like they belong. All right, so here's where this gets a little bit more challenging, because while we do need to live by the fruit of the Spirit and let the Spirit come in and change those people's hearts, we do have the Great Commission. We need to go out and make disciples. We need to share our faith, right? Now in 1 Peter 3:15, we see Peter say this: "And if someone asks about your hope as a believer, always be ready to explain it, but do this in a gentle and respectful way." Now, context matters here. Peter is writing to Christians that are being persecuted. They're suffering for their faith. People around them are watching, confused, maybe hostile, and Peter's instruction isn't go find people and tell them about Jesus. It's live differently, live in a way that shows the fruit of the Spirit, that lives out your faith, even though you're being persecuted for it. And when people ask you why, be ready to tell them. The sequencing Peter assumes here is that they ask first. Your life has created the curiosity, but they ask first, and then you need to answer. But the catch here is you need to have an answer. You can't just say, I don't know, I just believe. I don't know, this is how I grew up. That answer's not going to cut it. Not because God requires perfect theology, but because someone you love who is genuinely asking you deserves a real answer when they finally ask. And if you've been living the way that we're talking about in this video, they will ask. That means doing the work, reflecting on your own story, asking hard questions, wrestling with doubt, figuring out where Jesus was in your life and where you may have missed it. And if you haven't done that work yet, if you're still having trouble with doubt, if you're still asking questions and you need help navigating it, last week I made a video on doubt talking about how it can really strengthen your faith. I'll put a card up somewhere here so you can click on it, and I'll put a link in the description below. You should definitely go and watch that video as well. And when you have that answer, when someone you've loved well, when someone who trusts you, someone who has felt like they belong in your life, when they turn around and ask you that question, that is the Spirit opening the door you may not have even known you were building. So we started by asking what it looks like to share your faith. And I think we found that the Bible's answer is actually a lot less about argument and a lot more about presence. You can rarely debate someone into the kingdom. Paul told us that. But you can find common ground. You can show up before people clean up. You can love in ways that breaks people's worldview, and you can make a safe space for the Spirit to work. I know this is hard. I know there are going to be days when you just don't have it all together, when you fall apart, when you wonder if any of it matters. I feel that too. But what I keep coming back to is that God doesn't make mistakes. He made you the person that you are. He puts you in the situation that you're in, surrounded by the people that are surrounding you for a reason. The person in your life who doesn't know Jesus, they don't need an argument for them to find him. They need you, the real you, to show up, to show them the fruit of the Spirit, to love them in a way that nobody else has, to make them feel like they belong. You don't have to throw Jesus at anyone. You just have to love people well, genuinely, sacrificially, even when it costs you something that you won't get back. And you need to be ready to answer when they ask, because they will. And when they do, that is the Spirit opening a door for you to walk through with them. Amen. Thank you all so much for staying with me to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this, please hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel so you can see when more videos come out. And comment down below if you've experienced someone loving you and making you feel like you belonged. Those stories are what power our Christian faith. I love you all. We'll see you in the next one. All right? Peace.